It was an ordinary day at the park cafe, but what happened next was anything but ordinary. The cafe, a hidden gem nestled between rows of perfectly manicured trees and the soft murmur of a fountain, attracted the city's elite. The air was thick with the smell of freshly brewed coffee, warm bread, and the sweetness of blooming flowers. Waiters in crisp uniforms glided gracefully between tables, balancing trays of meticulously prepared dishes. And at the center of it all sat Bernard Green, a name synonymous with power, wealth, and influence. A man who had built his empire from the ground up, starting in real estate in his 20s and eventually branching out into ventures that most could only dream of. At 72, his presence alone commanded the room. His sharp suit, gold-rimmed glasses, and polished demeanor reflected the luxury of a life few could even fathom. Yet today, something felt different. As Bernard glanced at the menu, his movements were slow, almost hesitant, a stark contrast to the man who had once made every decision with confidence. Across from him sat Marissa, his much younger wife. A woman who seemed to have stepped off the cover of a magazine, her jet-black hair framing a flawless face, her bright red lipstick applied with precision. Every inch of her radiated elegance, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Instead, she absently twirled a diamond bracelet on her wrist, her attention not on her husband but on the phone screen in front of her. Nearby, just beyond the patio fence, a boy watched. His name was Malik. Small for his age, with an oversized hoodie hanging loosely around his thin frame. His dark eyes flickered from table to table, scanning plates and pockets, looking for an opportunity. No one in the cafe knew him, but his face was familiar on these streets. A boy with no place to call home, always on the edges of society's gaze, always just out of reach. Bernard glanced at his watch, his voice cutting through the ambient noise. "You're distracted again," he remarked calmly. Marissa looked up, offering a smile that felt more rehearsed than real. "I'm right here," she replied sweetly, her hand briefly touching his. "You know how much I enjoy these lunches." But Malik's attention was no longer on the conversation. His stomach growled loudly, reminding him of the gnawing emptiness inside. His gaze shifted to Bernard's table. The food, fresh, delicate, and perfectly plated, was a sight he hadn't seen up close in months. The pristine white bowl of soup, the golden-crusted bread, and the sparkling glass of water were a stark contrast to the stale, cold meals he scavenged from the streets. Then, something caught his eye. As Bernard adjusted his glasses and checked his phone, Marissa's hand slipped into her designer handbag. Malik's heart raced as he saw her fingers close around something small, a vial. With a casual flick of her wrist, she opened it, tilting her hand slightly over Bernard's soup. The liquid dissolved into the steaming bowl, vanishing as if it had never been there. Malik froze. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His breath caught in his throat. Was it possible? Could a woman, perfectly composed, sitting at a table in this elegant setting, really be doing what he thought? As Marissa stirred the soup, her face remained calm, her eyes cold. She leaned closer to Bernard, her voice low but unmistakable. "After all the trouble I've gone through, you won't ruin this now." Malik's mind raced. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. But who would believe him? A homeless kid, standing on the outskirts of a world that had long since ignored him. Who would take his word over a woman like Marissa, so poised, so polished? His instincts screamed at him to walk away. To stay out of it. But he couldn't. Not when he knew that someone was about to be hurt, and no one else seemed to notice. His gaze fixed on the couple, his stomach twisting. Bernard seemed distracted, his spoon hovering near the soup, his attention on his phone. Marissa, flawless again, flashed a smile, her hand resting on her chin as if nothing had just happened. Malik clenched his fists, the reality of the situation settling over him. He had to act. Without thinking, he pushed himself off the railing and strode toward the table. His legs felt like lead, but he couldn't stop. His voice cracked as he shouted, "Don't eat that." Heads turned. Conversations halted mid-sentence. A fork clattered to the floor. Bernard froze. His spoon, now inches from his lips, trembled in his hand. Marissa spun around, her face hardening with fury. "What did you just say?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. Malik stood his ground, his voice shaky but loud enough for everyone to hear. "She put something in your food." "I saw her." Gasps rippled through the café. Eyes locked onto Malik, some with disbelief, others with curiosity. Bernard blinked, looking between the boy and his wife. "What is he talking about?" he asked, his voice low, yet now tinged with doubt. Marissa scoffed, her composure slipping as she shot to her feet. "You little liar," she hissed, venom dripping from her words. "How dare you accuse me of something like this?" But Malik didn't flinch. He stood tall, his fists clenched. "I saw her," he repeated, his voice steady. "She poured something into your soup. You can smell it if you don't believe me." The tension in the air was suffocating. The once lively café had fallen into an eerie silence. Everyone watched, their meals forgotten, as the drama unfolded. Bernard's eyes shifted from Marissa to the boy, narrowing with suspicion. "Malik," he said slowly, his voice now thoughtful, "what exactly did you see?" Malik took a deep breath, his chest tight with nerves. It was a small bottle, like one for medicine. Clear liquid. "She poured it in when you weren't looking. Then she stirred it. I swear I saw it." Bernard turned to his wife, his face now pale with realization. "Marissa," he said quietly, "what's going on?" Marissa's expression cracked. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words seemed to freeze in her throat. The facade she had built so carefully began to crumble. The police were called. Sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder as they approached the café. Marissa's panic was evident now, her composure shattered. She tried to wriggle free, her voice rising in desperation, but Bernard's grip on the situation was firm. "You're not going anywhere," Bernard said, his voice cold, as he grabbed her wrist. The officers arrived, and the scene intensified as they tested the soup. Marissa's calm demeanor had completely dissolved. The truth was about to be revealed. In a moment of desperation, she finally cracked. "I'm tired of living in his shadow," she spat. "I was never supposed to let him make it past this year." The entire café gasped in shock. Marissa's confession was a bombshell. The officers wasted no time. "Ma'am," one of them said, "you're under arrest for attempted murder." As Marissa was escorted away, Bernard sat back in his chair, his hand trembling. The weight of betrayal, of not seeing the truth before, was too much to bear. But his gaze shifted to Malik, who had saved his life. For the first time, Bernard saw the boy, not as a street urchin, but as someone who had the courage to act when no one else would. "You saved my life," Bernard said, his voice soft but sincere. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." Malik hesitated, his voice barely a whisper. I couldn't let it happen. I couldn't stand by." Bernard smiled faintly. "You did something most people wouldn't have. You stood up for what's right. That takes courage." As the café slowly returned to normal, Malik felt something he hadn't in a long time, hope. And Bernard? He was changed forever, grateful for the bravery of a homeless kid who had more heart than most. Sometimes, it's the people we overlook who hold the greatest strength. Courage doesn't always wear a suit, and kindness doesn't always come from wealth. Malik's bravery had changed Bernard's life. And maybe, just maybe, it would change his own too. Outro. If you were moved by Malik's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales of courage, truth, and redemption. You never know, your small actions could create life-changing impacts for someone else.